Hi, welcome to my Ask Me Anything. Earlier in the week on here on YouTube, on Instagram, and on our mailing list, I asked people to ask me questions. So here I am answering them. We're just going to get straight into it, and I hope you enjoy what we get talking about. So, firstly, from our Instagram. Will there be a Cotic downhill bike? It's unlikely. This is referring to the collaboration that I did with Nico Malalian Frameworks, where I designed a front triangle for Nico's race bike out of 853 because he was interested in testing the give and go and the steel flex and the feel and all of that kind of thing for the bikes. And he raced it at the Fort William World Championships in 2024, which was absolutely amazing. But even though they really liked the bike, and actually anyone who wasn't a World Cup racer really loved it, loved the feel and the confidence-inspiring nature of the steel front triangle. The fact that the race team went with the stiffer aluminium bike means that there's not quite the imperative to look into the steel bike, but it was a cool project. So yeah, that's that. Do you have confidence in the Shimano motors going forward as many manufacturers have moved away from them? Yeah, I've got total confidence in them. We really like them. And you know, Shimano are huge. They're not going anywhere. And I like the functionality, and I like the feel, and I like the power. I like that it's lighter than the Bosch system. And yeah, other manufacturers are moving away, to some other brands, but it's all to do with this weird kind of power race, which I kind of don't get. The Shimano, the Rocket is a full power bike. The Shimano motor is 85 Newton meters, 600 watts. Gives you 4 times your input. It's really powerful, but I almost never use it on full power on boost. I use it on the tarmac riding to work, and if I'm on like a really steady fire road climb that I want to get up fast. But apart from that, it's basically unusable. So anything that even more powerful just seems completely pointless to me. And I like the functionality that it's got. And the other reason, like to the confidence piece, we're a small brand doing an e-bike. Direct to consumer, which means that we have to have confidence in our supplier. And one of the great things about Shimano is that you can go into any Shimano dealer if you do get a bit of a glitch with your Cotic e-bike, and get them to plug it into the diagnostic and have a look at it. And that's really important, because whilst we've always got your back as Cotic, we can't be there, everywhere in the world. So to have that Shimano support in the field is also super important to us. So no, we're really happy with Shimano stuff. Okay, please can you put on your website examples of cable routing? I built up a Flare Max last year and I'm not 100% happy with the routing. Sure, but drop us an email and send us some photos. I'm sure we'll be able to help you out with that. Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, talk to us, we'll figure it out. Gloss CMYK should make a comeback as a colourway. That was a great colourway. So that was from our very first long shot bike. So we first introduced long shot geometry on the Beefy in 2017, and one of the colourways was Gloss CMYK. Just Google Cotic Beefy CMYK and you'll see some photos. It was a black frame with the cyan, magenta, yellow stripes on it. It was really cool. So yeah, that was a fun bike. It wasn't as popular as you might think, as cool as it looked. So that was one of the reasons why it hasn't come back. But yeah, good colourway that. Would any future designs of a Cotic full squish have a straight seat tube as used on the e-Rocket, so the dropper post could be fully inserted? Well, we keep an eye on it. Obviously we've got the Rocket, the Rocket kind of design now, but actually the drop link bikes have tons of insertion anyway. I know that the pivot in the middle of the seat tube, does limit it up to a point, but there are very few riders who can't get at least a 180 drop seat post in it. And once you're into the C3 and C4, C3 and above sizes, most people can get a 200 or a 210. And actually, I think that for my money, that's enough. I'm tall, I've got really long legs, and I've tried a 240, and it was just weird. You know, it was too low. You know, I felt like I didn't have a saddle in the bike, and it's actually like surprising how much you use the saddle when you move around. So it's not a no, it's not a yes. It's just something that I think the current bikes actually do better than most people think they do. So yeah. Anyway. With your EBs flowing out to customers now nicely, have you considered playing with the Intra Drive setup? Not really, no. It's been a big enough job just getting the e-bike out with the Shimano motor. But for those of you who don't know, Intra Drive are a British startup who are doing a MGU, a motor gearbox unit. So you ditch the derailleur, and it has a gearbox in the motor. And the reason why people are asking us this a little bit is because it uses the Shimano bolt pattern. So we do talk to Intra Drive. I've been aware of it for a long time, and I do talk to the guys, and I do keep in touch with them, but it's not the work of a minute to put it in the bike. And there are certain issues with it with regard to battery install, because they don't have a particularly attractive external battery option for us. And also, they're not fully in production yet. So we have to. There's only so much budget we've got for investing in product, and at the moment, it's not for that. The other thing is it currently uses a really small sprocket. It's like effectively a 28, whereas the Shimano uses a 34, which means that the kinematics of the bike could be all completely out. And also, I'm not even. Last time I checked, I'm not even completely convinced a chain would have cleared our swing arm chainstay as well. So. Yeah, we do keep an eye on it, and it is interesting, but it is not just a bolting goodie like people think it might be. Let's see. If you would have to build a cheap, as in cheap as possible, bike that's still as good as any other Cotic, what design choices would you make, and which parts would you spec it with? I mean, you're probably looking at a Beefy bronze build, to be honest, or one of the bronze builds on the Escapade, because if we compromise any more on material, once we move away from 853, we use our own specified heat-treated chrome moly. But if we move away from heat-treated chromo into standard chromo or 631, which is the lower end Reynolds tube set, you lose so much strength that then you have to increase the wall thickness. And that's not necessarily just a weight issue. It makes the tube stiffer, which means the ride feel goes to pot, or it just feels like any other steel bike and not a Cotic. And realistically, the bikes that we build with the bronze build are bikes we would still ride ourselves. We don't compromise beyond that point, partly because of the economies of the scale of the brand that we are, but partly because we just feel that if you go even cheaper than that, it starts just being not nice to ride. And there's plenty of other brands, who are able to do value builds or, builds with really cheap components on really cheap frames to help people get into the sport. We're just not in a position to do that, so it's just play to your strengths. If you had to load as much cake as possible onto a Cascade, what would be your choice of racks? Oh my god. Well, I don't know, pizza rack on the front? Just kind of comestibles? I don't know, funny question. Is it possible to demo a coil shock on a Rocket? Absolutely, yeah. I've currently got the coil IL on my bike, but we can swap that into a demo bike. Or if you're my height, you can borrow my bike because it is available to demo. Or we've got a Kitsuma coil that can go on the bike as well. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, drop us a line, book in. Do you have any insight as to brand owner why so many big-ish companies are disappearing? Have you had to alter your methods to combat the changing economy? I don't have any distinct insight, but the vast majority, most companies that go bust is just they run out of cash, or they run out of availability of debt to finance a business through a difficult time, which is like the investors have mostly pulled the plug on the bigger brands. Yeah, so it's sort of as simple as that, really. Have we had to alter our methods? We haven't really altered our methods, but it feels like it's really hard to get a sale these days, compared to what it was. And it fluctuates a lot, much more than it used to. But so we're trying some different things. I mean, I'm doing stuff like this. I'm doing a bit more of the social media. We've got our little quiz on the website, where you can answer a few questions, and then me or Paul will email you back with a personalised bike recommendation, just trying to help people engage with the process and get some recommendations on how to bike. So yeah, we've changed little things, but we haven't fundamentally changed how we do business. Yeah. Why does the Jet have an H in it? The Jet has an H in it because we liked it as a name, because sort of Flare, Jet, Rocket kind of sat as a kind of a set of names for a group of product, which is the drop link bikes, the full suspension bikes. But Jet was already trademarked in the bicycle space, so we were looking for another option. And there used to be I think it was a punk band, but there used to be a band called the Jets, which had the H in it, so we used that. Will you be making any single speed or hub gear options in the future? No, we just don't get high enough demand for it. And putting sliding dropouts or anything that involves chain tension onto bikes which are 99% bought by people with gears just adds weight and complexity and cost, and I just don't think it's a good idea. If you do want to single speed your Cotic, what I have just recently been using, and I've been using it to test BB height stuff, but Velo Orange do a eccentric bottom bracket, which is really, really good. It works on Shimano cranks. So you have to use 24mm axles, but it basically threads into the bottom bracket, but then the bearings are offset, so you can tension the chain using that. It was really good. So yeah, Velo Orange eccentric BB, go for that. Do you think steel hardtails are being picked up by new generations, or are they being kept alive by a finite supply of nostalgia for 90s coners and curves? I don't think steel hardtails are necessarily kept going by nostalgia completely, because they're fundamentally a good product. It's the best material to build a hardtail out of, because without the rear suspension, the fact that the steel will, give and go and breathe with the trail means it's just the best thing to build a hardtail out of. So if you're going to ride a hardtail, because you're getting into the sport, and it's, you maybe need a bike that's a bit cheaper or a bit more reliable, or you just, you're not too confident with maintenance yet, then, all of these things that younger people or people getting into the sport, are. It's a brilliant thing. So no, it's just a really good product for what it is. And I guess the other thing is that if new generations are coming from like a more BMX or dirt jump background as their way into the sport, all of those bikes are steel. So I could see them looking at a steel hardtail mountain bike and thinking, well, that's like my dirt jump bike or my BMX bike. So no, I don't think it's necessarily a nostalgia thing. What's your dream car? Must be able to accommodate your bike, obviously. I mean, this sounds awfully. I mean, it's awfully modest, but up until recently, I had for a few years, I owned a Peugeot 306 GTI 6, which was kind of my dream car in my 20s, because a couple of my mates had them. I had a diesel one back in the day, which was just brilliant. And I loved having that car. It just made every drive a bit special. And I had a bike rack on it, and you could put a bike in the back. And I had a brilliant time when I did the EWS in 2022 with Chris from Downtime up in Tweed Valley. I went in my 306 and just drove those borders roads, and yeah, mega weekend. So yeah, I loved that. That was ace. But as for a dream car, like sort of cost no object, I think I'd probably like do a build on something like a cool estate car. Yeah, something like a cool estate car, but with like mega expensive dampers and like a full setup on the suspension. So it was just like, was amazing handling, but it was actually like pretty sleeper. I did used to have a Mark III Ford Mondeo V6, which I absolutely loved, which was really cool, really big. Actually, yeah, maybe a build on an ST220, that would be cool. Yeah, like a custom built Ford ST220. Best biscuit out there, Hobnob, closely followed by Ginger Nut. How would you adapt the Beefy Max for bike packing adventures such as the Nice-Torino Rally? I would get a custom frame bag made, which fit around wherever your water bottles were not. So you got the maximum amount of space there. Strap on a gas tank bag on the top tube with your head tube, because you can get those that strap on, they don't necessarily need the mounts. Get something like one of those restrap bar bags with the little clamps on the bars, so you've got something in front of you. And then at the rear, either a seat post rack, or if you still want to use your dropper, because we use the Syntace rear axle on the Beefy Max, get the tail fin aero pack, which fits to the axle, because then you'll be able to have a rack, and you'll still be able to drop your seat post. So yeah, that's how I do that. I'm just going to check that this is still recording. Yes, it is. A bit nervous. We had a bit of a technology fail earlier in the day. Okay. Last one on Instagram. How financially sustainable is running in-house production of bikes? Is it a side business that just sustains itself? Blah, blah, blah. We don't actually produce any frames in-house. So all of our frames are even the UK made frames are subcontracted out to various amazing makers and builders. So no, we don't actually produce things in-house. The UK made and the EU made stuff works brilliantly for us, because we've got shorter supply lines, better communication, and we can build in smaller batches, so it's so we can respond a bit better to demand, and cash flows better and stuff like that. So that's why that works, but we don't actually produce in-house. Okay, Facebook comments. Where are we? So, first, thanks for making bikes. I'm enjoying my new Solaris. Thank you for buying a Solaris. A couple of handlebar questions. When deciding on handlebar width for an MTB, does the bike geometry play a part, or is it just a matter of rider preference? I prefer a large back sweep, but I don't see many riders use them on MTB. It's mostly rider preference. I mean, one thing I would say is with long shot geometry, because it's designed to use the 35mm stem, if you have that makes the steering very responsive, even with the slack head angle. So if you try and run quite narrow bars with that, the steering gets really touchy and nervous. So you can't really use bars much less than 700 on long shot geometry. But apart from that, like rise and back sweep is totally rider preference. And the only thing I would say is, if you do prefer a large back sweep, is like tie a piece of string between the middle of the grips, and see where that comes relative to the steerer tube, because you'll probably find that in order to get that string not behind the steerer tube, maybe in line with the steerer, or maybe a little bit ahead of it, you might need a longer stem than the 35mm stem that we normally put for more regular sweep bars. But no, it's just rider preference. So yeah, if you like big sweep bars, put them on, go for your life. What led you to change the Cotic logo? We wanted something to stand out a bit more. I went into this in a lot of depth when I did the Downtime podcast earlier this year. So if you go back to the Downtime podcasts on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, from May 2025, I talk all about that and the development of the e-bike. But mainly it's because even though our branding has been relatively consistent, you know, the Cotic logo and the Cotic logo type, for the whole time we've been doing Cotic, a lot of other brands have gone in the same direction as that. So even though initially it was relatively unusual, it's sort of become more common and a little bit generic, you know, relative to what everyone else is doing. So we wanted to really change it up to make it stand out again and make Cotic bikes stand out, because Cotic bikes are you know, unusual and interesting and, you know, and not really mainstream. So we wanted the logo and the branding to reflect that. So they looked as special as they are as a product. Okay, next question. Many other 29er steel frames come with shorter chainstays around 430. Wouldn't a shorter chainstay make the bike turn quicker? My Solaris and Beefy Max are okay at 90% of the turns, but sometimes it's hard to turn fast. I think this whole short chainstay thing is a bit odd. It can make the bike feel more responsive, but I found that actually it makes it harder to turn, because, so if you imagine yourself with the wheels here and you're here, if you shorten the chainstay, you're effectively moving yourself backwards in the wheelbase. And particularly when bikes got very long in the front. You know, when we first started building long bikes, we kept the rear end the same and just increased the front, and they had this kind of slightly wheelbarrow-y feel, like the whole bike was all in front of you. And then when we grew the rear end, suddenly it balanced out. It felt like you were on the axis of the bike, which felt more intuitive and natural to me. And also that naturally puts more weight back onto the front wheel, which when you've pushed the front wheel out is important. So yeah, I don't know, quick's a bit of a difficult one to figure out, because I find that the bike's changed. I like the balance of the bike. So I designed so the bike feels balanced, which I think gives the rider more confidence, which means that you're more likely to, you know, make it into turns or commit to turns. So I think it's just a preference. And like I say, lots of other brands do shorter chainstays. So if you want shorter chainstays, there's plenty of people that do it. It's just not something that I think makes a Cotic or makes, you know, is my preference for how I want the bike to handle. So where are we going? And love what you guys do. Here are some questions. Is there a noticeable right? Okay, so this guy got really into like some real detailed questions on the Escapade, and I actually answered it on the Facebook post, because it was just, it would have taken me half an hour on here. But Ian, thank you for your question about the Escapade versus the 853 Escapade, and please go and have a read of the post, because I answered in detail. Okay, YouTube comments. As a former owner of a Solaris and a Jet, I appreciate the ride quality and traditional feel of a steel pedal bike. Did market forces influence your decision to create the Rocket e-bike, or was it a route you really wanted to go down? So initially, we started the e-bike project back in 2018, and that was a market forces thing. None of us at the time particularly wanted an e-bike, but it was obviously getting big. So we thought, like, you know, let's act from a position of knowledge. Let's build some prototypes and see where they are. And and if you followed the e-bike project at all, or even if you haven't, if you Google Cotic e-bike, you will find some features from about 2021 when we told the world about the aluminium prototype e-bikes, which were very much used an off-the-shelf kind of kit of parts with a Cotic suspension, and they were a little bit more generic than the current bike. And we first rode those, and we liked the idea of the e-bike, but I had a lot of learning to do in terms of the ride dynamics and getting the handling right and managing the mass. And also, ultimately, we never really liked those black prototypes particularly, and it was mainly to do with the weight. They were all like 25 kilos. And they really did, and what we found is once e-bikes get above about 22 kilos, you have to change your riding style. They feel like a bit of a runaway train in some situations. You know, if you're riding steep technical terrain, particularly if it's slippy, you know, you hit the brakes and the bike doesn't feel like it's slowing down. You know, you can have a few like scary moments on them. So it took us a while to go that way, but obviously during the course of that time, e-bikes have developed, the market's developed, and we learned more, and eventually, you know, we got to the point where we wanted, you know, we had the Rocket or the prototypes of the Rocket, and I absolutely loved it. It's one of my favourite bikes ever. So it went from kind of market forces to a route we really wanted to go down, because you know, a few more of my mates, in the meantime, quite a few more of my mates have got e-bikes, so that, you know, so I'm in the fortunate position to also be able to have an e-bike now as well, which means I can ride with them and, you know, do that kind of thing. So yeah, it was market forces, but then that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, one of the reasons why we built the original Rocket back in 2012 was a market forces thing, although that was a little bit more ride driven because we did want full suspension bikes for ourselves, was because if we'd have just stayed a hardtail brand, we saw that market was shrinking because full suspension bikes were becoming more the norm and more reliable and you know, more people's first choice of bike. So we've always kept an eye on that kind of thing. But yeah, so that's the answer to that. Would you ever make a Beefy with sliding dropouts? No. Like I said earlier, too much complexity and weight and cost for the very few people who would actually use the functionality. Get one of those eccentric BBs. When did you start riding mountain bikes? Christmas Day 1987. I have a photo of me on my rally montage in my dressing gown in my mum and dad's living room on Christmas Day 1987. I was 11 years old and I got my first mountain bike, and a bunch of my mates had mountain bikes, and I used to live, I grew up in a place called Bedford, and our house was right on the edge of some fields, right on the north end of town. So we just used to go crashing around the edges of fields and go ride around the estate. And yeah, I've always ridden bikes, you know, but I really properly fell in love with it at that point. So yeah, long time ago. What are the advantages and disadvantages of 4-bar linkages over other suspension designs? That's a big question, because a 4-bar link can be all sorts of different things. I mean, you know, a VPP is a 4-bar link. A DW link is a 4-bar link. It's just like, you know, it's just, you know, it depends on how long the links are. So I mean, I guess if you're talking specifically about like horsed link type bikes with the chain stay pivot rather than the seat stay pivot that drop link and rock link have, the thing that you can do is you can manipulate the anti-rise, which is the braking effect, more easily. So you can, with drop link and rock link, which are they're a 4-bar link, but they're a linkage driven single pivot. So the rear axle is on the same bar swing arm as the main pivot, and then all the rest of the pivots are to do with actuating the suspension. So with a chainstay pivot, you can manipulate the anti-rise so that it can be less than 100%, which means that it can have just a different feel under braking. With rock link, drop link type bikes, the anti-rise kind of, you can manipulate it within a few percent, but it tends to be around 100%. which just makes the bike very sort of stable and neutral under braking, rather than doing anything, you know, a lot one way or the other. So that's that. But all the other things, I mean, in terms of, you know, you do have more options to manipulate the anti-squat and the and things like that. But actually, one of the reasons why I went to drop link was I did do a suspension bike before the original Rocket in 2012. It was the Hemlock back in 2005-6, and that was a 4-bar link with a horse link, and actually that had a lot of anti-rise, so it actually extended under braking. It was actually quite hard to manage in certain situations. So, you know, you learn your lessons. But I actually found that the pedaling performance and the anti-squat performance that I kind of dialed into the 4-bar link, I could just as easily achieve with the single swing arm. And actually that was going to be stiffer. It was going to be potentially more reliable, because we were eating up chainstay pivots and things like that. So there was a lot of things going on, and there was also, back then, the FSR patent was still enforceable. So if we wanted to sell it outside the UK, we had to go away from it or pay Specialized the license. So it's all the thing about suspension designs is that most of them can be made to work really nicely within a window of preferences. So people make much more fuss about it than they perhaps need to. Most bikes ride pretty nice, pretty much regardless of the suspension design. Okay, so that's YouTube. So now we are going on to the questions. So we have a mailing list. So if you want to hear from me or any of the Cotic team about upcoming events, hear first or in detail about our new products, or anything like that, really. Sometimes do a bit of market research or things like that. Our mailing list, cotic.co.uk/contact. You'll find the sign up form there. So I asked the email list if they would ask some questions, and I've got a bunch of those here. So material questions. Without revealing any secrets, how does Reynolds 853 compare to FM tubing, and what is the rationale for using it one over the other in different parts of the frame? Why is the full sus swing arm alloy? And lastly, have you experimented with 953? Okay, so one at a time. FM and FE are our Cotic branded tube sets, which we use. FM is what we use on everything except the down tube on the Beefy. And FE is what we use on the regular Taiwan-built Escapade. They're heat-treated chromoly, so basically the same as what Reynolds calls 725. So the difference is that it's about 10 to 15% less strong than 853, and it doesn't air harden when you weld it. So you have to use a little bit more of it to get the same strength, but it's not far off compared to using regular chromoly, unheat treated chromoly, which is about 40% less strong than 853, obviously you have to use a lot more of it to make it strong enough. So there's actually not a great deal of difference between the two, really. That's one of the reasons why we use it. But the main reason we use it in different parts of the frame and on the Escapade is price. We use it to hit a price point with the Beefy because it's our entry-level hardtail model. And the Escapade, even though the product now is more of a, more seen as really nice, sort of high-end gravel bike, it grew out of our effectively commute bike lines, which is why it doesn't have, why it traditionally, apart from the limited editions, hasn't had 853 tubing. So that's why that is. Why is the full sus swing arm alloy? Similar reasons, actually. We could build a steel swing arm, and indeed we have prototyped steel swing arms, and they're not especially any heavier, and the stiffness is fine and all of that. They are just enormously fiddly to make, because instead of using the two big forgings that we do at the head of the drop link swing arm, or CNC parts in the case of the rocket. You have to use smaller CNC parts welded to tubes, and then you've got to put like little plate reinforcements to get the fatigue life and all of this kind of stuff. And then at the other end, the CNC part for the link, for the drop out into the pivot, to make that light, you might have to fabricate stuff. And then and as soon as you're fabricating a lot of stuff on a swing arm, it can move and twist and all of that kind of stuff, and that's not very good for repeatability. So because we've always made up until the rocket, we've always made the swing arms in Taiwan. That's just how the Taiwanese preferred to work. It meant that the swing arms were a little bit cheaper, and it also meant that they were just a lot more consistent and repeatable, because it was a single thing with lots of welds, and you can cold set aluminium after it comes out of the heat treat, before it completely cures. So it's just a lot better, more consistent. That's why we use aluminium. Have you ever experimented with 953? Yes, we have. 953 is the high-end Reynolds tubing. So 853 is an air hardening high alloy steel. 953 is what's called a miraging stainless steel. It is 40% stronger than 853, something like that. It's mental strong, but it's unbelievably capricious, and it's unbelievably hard to weld and make and just build with, more so than titanium. It's really hard to work with. But also what we found was when we built mountain bikes out of it was 853 sits in this real sweet spot in terms of it's that much stronger than regular steel that you can use it in thinner sections to get that gorgeous Cotic ride feel, that give and go, that that grip, that grippy feel across chattery routes, all of that, that smooth ride, that doesn't beat you up on the gravel bikes. So, and it just sits right in the middle of like the Venn diagram of requirements. And 953 is so much stronger that in order to take advantage of that strength and make the bike lighter, you end up thinning the sections right down. I mean, I think the top tube on the mountain bike that we built was 0.3 mil in the middle. It was crazy thin. But what that does is you lose the stiffness. And whilst we're all about having some flex and give and go in a bike, there does come a point where it's too flexy, and 953 tipped over that point, and I built a Solaris type, a 29 hardtail, and it was really non-specifically bad, to the point where I was just convinced I was just having a bad time riding my bike, until I did a demo and had to jump on a production bike, and like I hadn't even left the yard, before I realised that, this is just way better. It's just so much nicer feeling. And it was just, it was just a bit like riding a credit card. It was a bit too flexy. We did actually sell it to a Cotic customer who put a rigid fork on it and built it up like as a super light, almost sort of quasi gravel bike before gravel bikes were a thing, and he absolutely loves it. But yeah, 953 isn't for us. I'm sure it makes nice road bikes, but it's not for mountain bikes. Okay. Could you make an acoustic rocket with the e-rocket suspension layout? Aesthetics are subjective, but water bottle space is not. I mean, potentially we could, but the drop link bikes, with the exception of the smallest size, the drop link bikes have space for water bottles. People always go on about it, but just because it's under the top tube, I don't know, it seems to weird people out. I actually find it a really good place to put it, because on most of the sizes, it actually wedges the water bottle against the down tube, so it's actually really secure. So you can get water bottles on pretty much any of the drop link bikes anyway, and we do our little frame bags where you can stash kit. I mean, the drop link bikes are fine for that kind of thing. Anyway, are there any plans to move to a direct mount T-type mech? If so, and if so, very likely unfeasible. Would there be any retrofit possibilities to the current Rocket Max? UDH is, yeah, we're slowly moving to UDH as things that obviously where are we? It's on Beefy, it's on Solaris, it's just on Cascade. So we're just sort of turning things over, and it's on the e-bike. So we're introducing it slowly as we go. We've just got a set of Eagle 90, which we are going to have a go with. But I spent a day riding Axis T-Type on an e-bike, and it was fine, but it didn't really, it didn't blow me away, given that that the reason why I was riding it was I was borrowing it because Seb from Pink Bike was riding my Rocket, and that's got Shimano Link Glide on it, which is designed to shift under load as well. So Link Glide isn't quite as smooth as T-Type, but it's not far off. And actually, the other thing is that when we've had electric gears available to buy, our customers just don't really seem to be that keen on them. That's why we've waited for the Eagle 90 for the mechanical transmission to have a go with it, because it just doesn't seem that the demand is really there for it, and especially now Shimano do wireless gears without needing a T-type mech. It's just not something that's been seen as a priority. We certainly don't get asked for it all that often. I'd be really interested. Who, drop a comment. Who is really keen on having transmission and is not having transmission putting you off buying a Cotic? Because actually, if you're just wanting UDH because you want an easily available mech hanger, we're going to support Synthase into the future. You can buy Synthase all over the place because there's tens of thousands of bikes who use Synthase. I mean, there's thousands of Cotic bikes out there. We've been doing it so long, but Cube used it for years. And Synthase, in my opinion, is a better regular hanger than a UDH. You're much less likely to smash your mech to pieces hitting your mech with a Synthase hanger than a UDH. So from the point of view of mech hangers, the Synthase system works brilliantly. Eventually we'll turn things over, but it's not a high priority unless it is for you guys. So let me know, is no transmission putting you off? Be really interested to know. Let's see. So this is another one about the bike industry was looking pretty dicey. This is one about big companies going bust. Seem to do a good job of reducing your exposure to this. I'm glad you're still around. I'm glad we're still around as well. Thank you. How are your thoughts on how things are looking now? It's been unbelievably hard the last couple of years, unbelievably hard, and and I've had to make some decisions I didn't want to make, and I've probably made them a bit too late, because in some cases, it's I've not, this is my first time doing, even though I've been doing it a long time, it's still my first go at it. But we're still here. I'm optimistic about the future, because we've got some good plans. We've got a good model line. It's been really, really difficult. I mean, if you'd have asked me a year ago, I'd have said, it must be really nice to have investors in your brand, because it, spreads the financial risk and all of that kind of stuff. And now we're seeing investors running out of patience with the bike industry and pulling the plug. And even though it's, the financial risk is all on me as the owner of Cotic, it does mean that I have the discretion, fortunately, to keep going. So yeah, it's a weird one. It's really hard, and I'm glad we're still here. But if you want us still to be here, just buy the bikes. It would be, that's ultimately it. If you like Cotic, buy Cotics. How would a steel XCO race whippet fare against the common carbon equivalents? It'd be cool to see a Cotic race bike again. Okay, so this is probably throwing back a long, long way. So when we used to build titanium frames, we had a racer who ended up getting picked up by the Australian National Federation. She raced the World Championships XC in Canberra in 2009, which again was another, I've had two bikes that I've designed raced at World Championships, one in XC, one in DH, and it was not on my bingo card when I started Cotic because it wasn't designed to be a race bike brand. So it is pretty cool. As for how it would fare, I'm not sure it would be. I mean, I'm sure it would be fine, but it's more to do with the rider than it is the bike in XC. And also in XC, I think they're all riding sort of reasonable travel full suspension bikes with dropper posts and proper tyres and stuff like that. So so I'm not sure it would even be a hardtail. And actually, a lot of the things that make Cotic, like the ride feel and and that give and go and things like that, they're amazing for most conditions, but I suspect for smashing around an XC course for an hour and a half, actually just having it being as stiff as light as possible probably is the best way to go. So where are we? What do you think of? Excuse me, itching. What do you think of short travel, e.g. 40mm suspension forks for gravel bikes? I don't know. It's a bit. I sort of see, I get it and I don't, I sort of get it intellectually, but I don't get it as a rider. So you can't currently put a 40mm suspension fork on any of our bikes. The Escapade has two shorter forks, and we designed the Cascade very specifically for 100mm suspension forks. Because when I was making those decisions and the 40mm forks were floating around, to me, the 40mm suspension forks were barely any lighter than a full 100mm like SID SL or something like that. So I was like, well, if there's hardly anything in it, why not just put a proper suspension fork on it? It just seemed like, so that's why the Cascade has full like proper mountain bike suspension capability. I mean, I can see it because I can see why the American brands are really big on it, because they have these great big long washboard like unsealed roads, literally gravel roads, which we don't really have in the UK. So it's hard to get an understanding of that riding where you're just sat in a position and you've just got this constant like I can see why that would work. So no, I see it, but yeah, I haven't spent any time on them particularly, and yeah, there was a reason why I actively chose to do something different for Cascade. So what happened in 2020 when you requested help and having sent my CV was publicly called out among others for not including my name and email on the email title? Was a fan, had a road rat, 2 Escapades, Flare Max, not anymore. There's no names on these, but well, I don't remember that, but I mean, in 2020 we needed a temp mechanic because the supply was so patchy. We had like bursts of requirement for a lot of help. Oh, and I think, did one of our mechanics break his wrist? I don't know. I can't remember. It's a long time ago. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to cause offence or upset you, and I'm really sorry we lost you as a fan of the brand. It was a pretty stressful time, so that might be, it's a reason, not an excuse. But I'm sorry you're upset, and I hope that that this apology means something, and that if we can get past that, you can maybe look at enjoying your Cotics again. Okay, we've had limited editions of the Escapade in 853 and the 853 UK. Do you see Cotic doing more of these, and what are the reasons why you did them in the first place rather than just selling the standard frame? Okay, so yes, I can see us doing more 853 Escapades, but it just at the moment we're just working out how to do it, because the frame builder who made our UK edition Escapades, the limited editions that we did over the last couple of years, is now no longer building. So that's why that's come to an end, even though there is still some pretty, some reasonable demand for it. But at the moment we have the regular Escapade in stock, and they're great. So if you do want a nice gravel bike in that kind of genre, then absolutely get that. But the reasons why we did it was to do with COVID supply. We did the Escapade. We did a full batch of Taiwan-made Escapades in 853 back in 2022, and that was because of material availability in Taiwan. We had a batch that we desperately needed, and they had most of the material, but they couldn't get one or two of the tubes from the mill that we get our tubes from. And being a small brand, we were always at the bottom of the food chain when it came to getting stuff in during COVID, which is why our availability was so patchy. So we said to our frame vendor, if we ship you some 853 tubes, can you make them in 853? And we had an inkling that it would work, because we did get people asking, because even though the 853 frames are only about 50 grams lighter than the regular Escapade, so there's not a huge performance advantage in it. People do like the premium tubing and the name and all of that kind of thing. So we figured there was something in it, and they went real well. But yeah, mainly it was an availability thing. And then the UK made limited edition was like a turbo version of that. Is that we although it's all ironed out now, we had a really rocky couple of years through 23 and 24 where we had almost no supply from Taiwan for various reasons, and that wasn't to do with COVID. That was just some business fuckery that was going on in the background that we only just kind of ironed out this year. And yeah, we'd run out of Escapades, and we were not sure when we were going to see any more from Taiwan. So and because we knew there was this underlying demand for 853 ones, we did the UK ones. So yeah, basically we built the UK ones because that meant getting some Escapades in 2024. So basically it was that they were stopgaps is the wrong word, but they were Harry over the back's getting a phone call. The stopgaps is the wrong word, but they were a way to make the Escapade available for people when we had demand and we couldn't get supply. Excluding the current models, what is your favourite Cotic bike? Rocket Max Gen 2. Easy. It was the first long shot Rocket Max from 2018. It was the first UK made bike, and it took me a long time to figure out the 29er thing with long shot. The regular 275 bike, the regular Rocket back then was just a 275 enduro bike. That sort of translated into long shot geometry relatively easily, and that was why it went on sale earlier. But getting the longer travel one sorted took a while. But when I did, when I committed to going to the really slack 63.5 degree head angle, and I just remember the ride where it clicked on the prototype, and it was relief, but it was just elation as well, because it was just, what a bike. And it helped me become so much better a rider because it was so capable. And actually back then, because we were so far ahead of the curve with the geometry stuff, I genuinely believe that back then 2018, 2019, the combination of the steel tubing, the 853, the ride feel, the geometry, the suspension design, I genuinely think that that was one of the best bikes you could buy anywhere. So yeah, it was, yeah, that bike. And actually, even though it changed, I had it repainted and changed colours, and I developed a couple of bikes, but I actually had the same pre-production frame as my bike for nearly 4 years. I didn't actually jump off it until I got onto the Rocket Max Gen 4 mule in like late summer 21. Yeah, loved that bike. Brilliant bike. Really boring question, sorry, Si. Why can't we use Halford Cycle to Work scheme? Cheers, Mark. Mark, yes, it's frustrating. So for our viewers not in the UK, we have something called a Cycle to Work scheme, which is like a government kind of tax break if you buy a bike for riding to work on. And there's a company called Halfords which do it, and we don't deal. They're the only one we don't deal with, and the reason is they take an enormous amount of money off the vendor, off the seller of the bike, in order to do what everyone else does for effectively a credit card commission. So they're greedy, and also for whatever reason they refuse to deal with us. So yeah, those two things. Do you foresee a day when Cotic would have a presence in the US? I don't really, and it does make me kind of sad, but you have to be such an enormous business compared to what we are to finance an office anywhere apart, away from your main HQ. We did look into it in 2019. We were looking into it in combination with a couple of other brands, but the costs involved in setting it up and the insurance and all of that kind of stuff, it would have been, just to get going, it would have been the best part of $500,000, just, which just it's not chump change. So, and it's not just the USA. I mean, we would love to be able to have an office somewhere, in Europe as well, because especially now after Brexit, it would be lovely to have a bit more, sort of close contact and to be able to more easily support our European customers. But unfortunately, unless we got considerably bigger in terms of volumes of bikes and turnover, we just can't afford to, much as we would like to. Hi, do you remember the Pace RC100 square tube bike? Is there an intrinsic reason for the round tubes over the square? I do remember it. I lusted after them. There is the intrinsic reason for round tubes over square. So round tubes are mainly round because bicycles started out with steel tubes, and that's the easiest way to draw a steel tube. I mean, you can draw square tubes, but a round tube is pretty efficient, and it's got a lot of nice properties. And then once you get into tube butting, actually that is a rotary process, so it's almost impossible to do on a square tube. And if you remember those Pace tubes, they were CNC machined. They used to mill them on each face to externally butt them, which is an enormously involved process. But actually, the reason why the Pace RC100 was square tubed was because Duncan, the original welder at Pace, didn't originally had a frame jig when he wanted to build a frame, so he got square tubes so that he could lay them all flat on a table to weld it up. So actually, it was more of a quirk of fate about that than anything else. I'm just going to check this is still recording. Yeah, we're still going. What is your favourite ever stock frame colour? Main batch, not a la carte. Copper orange, matte copper orange, the current one. My Rocket's that colour. I'm looking at the Rocket Max demo bike in that colour. It's a fabulous colour. I'm a big fan of orange. The original Cotic soles were orange. It's my favourite colour. That's why there's always been a thread of orange colour running through the Cotic brand. But yeah, matte copper orange, mega colour. It's actually a Bentley colour. You imagine, if you see something as big as a Bentley with that much orange on it, it's pretty aggressive, but it's very nice on a slim, beautiful steel Cotic. Okay, does a seat tube look better or with or without the seat clamp? Thinking about the latest Solaris here. I'm pretty agnostic about it. I like a fancy seat clamp, but I think there's something nice about the old school feel of the braze-on version. The reason why we've gone to the braze-on thing is because we're using a new Reynolds seat tube, which is direct fit for the seat post, so it's a bit lighter than the system we used to use. And excuse me, and the top of it isn't a standard seat collar size, so that's why we use the braze-on things. But no, I'm not too bothered either way. Will you be keeping the Max on the Rocket and Flare names? Over time, probably not. The reason why our bikes have that Max epithet is that when we did our Big Bang suspension bike expansion in 2016, and we introduced those extra 3 models all at once, 27.5 and 29-inch wheels were a thing. Both together. So we had the Rocket and the Flare, which were 275 wheels, and then the Rocket Max and the Flare Max were the 29er versions of them. And we did the Max, the model name then Max, because it made it easier to explain the fact that they were both the same kind. They were both the same kind of bike, just one had bigger wheels and one didn't. And obviously 275 has gone by the wayside, but also those 29er models sort of gained traction and became the bigger sellers. So over time we've just sort of kept the name. But no, I think we will begin to slide Max away from bikes. I mean, you've seen it on the Solaris and the Beefy already. So yeah, they'll slowly go away, but the names won't. The e-bike has the same name as one of the existing full sus bikes. Did you consider any other names to distinguish them apart more? We did consider a lot of other names, but naming bikes is really, really blimmin' tough. But actually we alighted on the Rocket, kind of throwing back to the Rocket Max. The Max kind of thing is that the Rocket Max is still in the range, and actually the Rocket is like the electric version of it. It's like if you're doing that kind of riding, the Rocket is that kind of bike. So we've sort of used the same idea as before of when we first introduced Max to do the same thing, because those two bikes kind of sit next to each other in the range. So that's why we've done it. Which model tends to sell quickest and is the most popular? Which one sells quickest tends to be the thing we've just got into stock, because people usually have been waiting for it. But the most popular model is the Cascade over the last year or so. Cascade's been our biggest seller for a little while. How sure are you there will never be another titanium Cotic? Fairly sure. So this is alluding to. Sorry, I'm just checking some other comments. So this is alluding to the fact that a couple of years ago I announced that we would no longer be building in titanium, because Reynolds did a sustainability study and found that titanium was nearly as much impact environmentally in terms of CO2 emissions as carbon fibre. This is because it takes an enormous amount of energy to manufacture, and it also is pretty much not recyclable. And just like carbon fibre, where it is recycled, it's kind of environmentally damaging. So it's not that advisable. So I would say it's 99% sure that we are not going to do it again. But I'm always open to new technologies coming. You know, if they find a lower impact way of extracting it, or they actually figure out a way to recycle it in a meaningful way, then I'd be open to it. But it's a wonderful material. But if we're going to try and keep reducing our impact as a brand, and we already use the lowest impact material that you can, then yeah, we can't be building titanium frames. What's your prediction for the future of the gear cable? That it is bright and it will not go away. As I mentioned earlier with the UDH thing and the transmission thing, whenever we have offered electric gears on our bikes, our customers, by and large, do not buy it. So yes, I don't see the gear cable going anywhere anytime soon. I don't use it. The only place I do use electric gears is on my e-bike, where it's plugged into the big battery in the middle of the bike. But none of my mates use it, who I ride with. No one else here uses it. It's just, it's a funny one. I don't know. The electric gears work really, really nicely, but so do gear cables. No, I can't see gear cables going anywhere. What's your opinion on SRAM transmission? How important is it for newbies to be able to shift under full pedaling load like the transmission group set allows? Well, I went over this a little bit earlier. I think transmission. I mean, transmission obviously works brilliantly. It absolutely does. But I think for mountain bike newbies to be able to shift under full pedal load, I mean, you can shift under pretty high loads on Shimano stuff as well, and particularly if it's the other thing with transmission is it up until they brought out Eagle 70 recently, you couldn't get it on particularly cheap bikes. Whereas Link Glide, which is Shimano's like pedal under load thing, you can get down to their Q's level group sets, which really are for the masses. So I think that's a wash. I think transmission is very easy to adjust. Once you've set it up, it's very easy to adjust. So that's or doesn't need a lot of adjustment, which is good for new bikers. But no, I don't think it's particularly. I think transmission's much more about performance-orientated riders than anything else, and it's a I mean, I know they've speeded up the shift recently on the electric stuff, but it's a very good e-bike drivetrain, really. Like I say, we don't have or haven't had a lot of demand for it, but I would be really interested to know if us not offering transmission on a lot of the range is stopping you buying a Cotic. It would be, we really want to know. Let us know. Let us know if you'd really like to see transmission. Let us know if you're completely happy with Shimano, mechanical drivetrains, one way or the other. What do you miss about the old Carver HQ? I miss how cheap it is. I mean, this place is beautiful. We've got our showroom here. We've got lots of space. We've got proper lighting. We're all in one place at Carver, our HQ for 15 years out in the middle of the Peak District. We're in 2 units on this up at the opposite ends of the same yard. So you had to kind of, whatever the weather, walk between them to do things. So there's an element of inefficiency to it. But yeah, it was a lot cheaper, and over the last couple of years, that probably would have been nice. But other than that, this place is great. It's much better for doing events. It's much better for working in. I can ride to work much more easily because it's closer to my house. It's better in almost every way. How reliable is it to have deliveries from Taiwan now you are a few years on from the pandemic? Will Cotic still order from Taiwan in 5 years' time? It's getting more reliable. As I mentioned earlier, we had a bit of trouble in the background that was sort of to do with our setup, not COVID, which meant that Taiwan deliveries have been a bit patchy over the last couple of years. And it's one of the reasons why we've diversified our supply chain even more into the EU, just to take the reliance off one place. But that's not necessarily to put shade on Taiwan. That's just an imperative to make the business a bit more robust. But actually, we've now struck up a really good working relationship with directly with our frame vendor, and we're actually ordering. We're actually getting deliveries again. We're ordering new stuff again. They're making some full suspension bits for us at the moment. We're just about to receive the new Beefy deliveries. And actually, now that the relationship's getting better, we're probably going to lean into it a little bit more and actually do some more stuff, back in Taiwan again. We will absolutely be ordering from Taiwan in 5 years' time unless something wild happens. And let's face it, you can't rule it out. I mean, we've had a lot of pretty wild things happen in the last 10 years. So, but yes, broadly, Taiwan is good, and we're getting good supply again, and we will be still working with them for the foreseeable. Will you ever bring back the champagne colour? You had it on the 2017 Solaris. Good colour, yes. We've not done, that's a Taiwan only colour. So one of the reasons why that's not come back is because of how bumpy it's been with our Taiwan supply over the last few years. But yeah, that's one to consider again. Yeah, we'll think about it. Are you still thinking about in-house fabrication? So we've had this question from a few people. This is from Rod, one of our great customers over in the USA. But yeah, a few people asked this one. When we moved into the big new building, we actually had space for a fabrication facility, and in 2023 we bought some machines. We were getting some help with advice in how to set it all up, and we were actually moving in that direction fairly strongly when the wheels came off the industry, and a bit frustrating really, because if we'd have actually managed to push it over the line, being able to make our own frames would have made that following year quite a lot easier because of how patchy our supply was. But 2020 hindsight and all that. But ultimately we didn't manage to push it over the line, because even though we had the machine set up and we had the intent, we hadn't recruited anyone to actually do the job. We hadn't worked out any systems, so we were a good 6 months away and tens of thousands of pounds of investment away from actually getting it done. And in the meantime, like I say, the wheels came off the industry, which meant we had to cut right back on our expenditure. And now we've actually got to the point where we've sold most of the machines, because it's just not going to happen in the foreseeable future. In the meantime, we set up with Fort, we've set up with our friends in Portugal, and we continue to work with Fiveland in the UK. So we've actually expanded our vendor base away from Taiwan, which was sort of the whole point of doing it in-house anyway. So yeah, it's not on the roadmap at the moment, but never say never. I love the Cotic brand and what it stands for on the sustainability side. Thank you. And the clean lines and the lovely steel feel. How tough is it to keep the business going financially in the wine industry? I mean, I've just been over this a little bit, but yeah, really tough. It's been really, really tough. Continues to be tough. So yeah, if you'd like it to be, if you appreciate Cotic and would like it to be less tough, then buy more Cotics. What's your favourite Shimano drivetrain? At the moment, despite all of my chat earlier about electric gears, I would say my favourite drivetrain at the moment is the electric the Di2 XT Di2 on my Rocket, because it's plugged into the motor and it gives me this free shift capability where I can shift while I'm freewheeling, so I don't actually have to be pedaling to shift gears as long as the wheels are rolling. The motor just powers briefly and lets you shift gears. It's so unbelievably useful, particularly in terrain that you're less familiar with. And the gears are just, consistent. They just happen every time, which again is really useful on the e-bike. So yeah, I'm a massive fan of that. Although I will give an honourable mention to the new little compact drive thing that Shimano have come out with. It was lost a little bit in the Di2 wireless kind of, they've finally done wireless kind of hoo-ha, but a little bit under the radar. On XT and XTR, you can now get a 28 tooth chainring and a 9 to 45 cassette, and you can use this short cage derailleur on it, and it gives you the same gear range as the regular cassette and a 32 chainring, but with lots of ground clearance and a proper little slim short cage rear mech. And I've been using that on one of my bikes, and it's ace. It's so nice. So yeah, big fan of that. So those two, but yeah, probably the Di2 on my e-bike. Okay. Any plans to offer a flat bar build on the Escapade? We do. I know it's not on the price list on the order page, but we've done a few flat bar Escapades and Cascades. Everything's assembled right there, and we can get pretty much any part you like. So if you're after a flat bar Escapade, just drop us a line. We can get something going for you. When can we expect a new Escapade? Will it have more tyre clearance and things like that? Well, we're getting low on stock of the current Escapade at the moment. There'll be there'll be a restock in probably March next year. That's what it's looking like. But you can already put 45mm tyres in the Escapade. And if you want to run shorter cranks, run shorter cranks. It's really not a problem. The BB height's pitched, for riding lumpy trails around, where we ride. So yeah, no, the current Escapade can do all of those things. I wouldn't worry about it too much. What do you think about size-specific chainstays and tubing? I think it's useful up to a point, and we've just done it on a couple of the models. So the Cascade Gen 2, which is just coming in now, has got a slightly smaller down tube and a little bit of what else have I done on it? Anyway, so the small and the extra small Cascade Gen 2 have got a slightly different tube, front triangle tube set than the larger frames, just to give a little bit more flex in the frame for the smaller, lighter riders. We were able to do that because of the flexibility of the vendor that we're working with. But it's little details. It's a tiny thing, really. Size-specific chainstays has more of an influence over the ride feel of the bike, and we have introduced that on the Rocket. Because of the nature of the way we build the main pivot, it's relatively easy to move it backwards and forwards. So we've shifted it rearwards to get a longer chainstay on the larger sizes, just to keep the weight balanced in the middle of the bike a little bit better. And also make steep climbing a little bit more secure for taller riders, which is obviously, with the power of the e-bike and how steep you can climb up things, is kind of more interesting. So yeah, but it's all very detailed stuff. So yeah, it's a good idea, but I think it's not quite, it's details now. Yeah. So Using the Solaris as a benchmark, Cotic frame has risen dramatically way above inflation over the last decade. For many reasons you've documented, but we now find it much more bougie luxury for a hardtail than an everyday riding people, which to me is at least one of the things that attracted me to Cotic in the first place. My question is, do you see this becoming more affordable? I think the Solaris is the only bike in the range that has really massively increased in price. I mean, given that they're UK made and all of that kind of thing, the drop link bikes have been almost the same price for years. The Cascade has gone up a little bit because of it's the EU manufacturing basically. The Taiwan was traditionally the Solaris was made in Taiwan, and then because of the supply chain issues that we moved it to EU, which put the price up. So, and the move to EU was the biggest bump in price, but it's not. But I think the cost of materials and the cost of making things has gone up enormously more than you think. I mean, like a decade ago, we were selling the Solaris for 675. It's now 1199 in made in the EU. But if we went back to Taiwan, it would probably still be not far under £1,000. I mean, it wouldn't be half the price. So it's I get that it puts it out of reach of more people, which is a shame. But we're not making more margin at it. We're just making it in a more expensive way, but in a way that's actually better for the environment and better for Cotic in terms of other things. Well, and actually just having some to sell. So there's definitely some elements of it which are, but then there's also the broader elements of the fact that inflation has put the prices of everything up. People's wages haven't really followed it, so that's potentially why it feels a little bit more than it perhaps might. The other thing is it's also an expectation in mountain biking as well, is because the amount of gravel bike frames and road bike frames which are made out of 853, even made in Taiwan and out of 853, which people sell for like 1,500 quid, more than we sell the Solaris for, and that side of the market doesn't seem to have a problem with it. So I think it's very much that mountain bikers have a perception that hardtails, even really, really nice ones, should be cheap. And really, really nice things, cost some money. The other thing is that we still have the Beefy in the range, which is Taiwan made and is a really good price. And if you want a trail bike, if you want a Cotic trail bike with nice feel and all of those features and the great handling, just buy a Beefy and put 29er wheels on it. It'll be great. So we're trying not to leave people behind by some of the pricing of the things, some of the parts. But we're also trying to do things better, and sometimes that means things being a little bit more expensive. Are you planning on releasing the Rocket as a frame set without the battery for EU customers? That way the end consumer could buy the battery and shipping wouldn't be an issue. We already do. You can absolutely buy a Rocket without the battery. Shipping the battery is sorted though. We've done all of the training and we can ship batteries. But yeah, we can absolutely ship it without the battery. Not a problem. Just give us a shout and we'll give you a price. Is there a Rocket Max V5 due? No. Because we did the Rocket instead. The Rocket Max is just still brilliant. It's really, it's a really, really, really good enduro bike. But the thing we're finding is that riders who do that style of riding are tending to buy an e-bike. So rather than developing a new Rocket Max, which we developed effectively an electric version. So yeah, that's what we've done. That's why those bikes are called Rocket and Rocket Max, and that's why they sit next to each other in the range. So yeah, so no, there isn't going to be a Rocket Max V5. There is the electric Rocket. Did you learn anything interesting, useful from the Frameworks DH frame experiments? Yeah, learned loads. I learned that it's horrendously hard to bend 853 tubing if you need to put bends in it to avoid shocks and things like that. I learned that the tubing we make the Rocket Max out of is entirely suitable for building a World Cup level downhill bike out of, which was very gratifying. I learned that World Cup racers are absolute savages in terms of what they do to a bike, and ultimately the reason why Nico chose to stick with aluminium for his race bikes was because they found the steel bike a bit too flexy for the load they were putting into it. But everyone I know who rode it who isn't a World Cup racer thought the feel of the bike and how mellow it felt and how confidence inspiring it felt, they really, really liked it. So I think there's still a place for that kind of bike with that material, absolutely. I just think that, you know, those guys just do things that are mind-bendingly high load and high commitment. But it was an absolute pleasure to be involved in that. It's so nice to have chatted to Nico about it and Ancho and met Asa and all of those guys. Yeah, what a treat. Yeah, really cool. So let's see. How do you view the relentless standards in the MTB changes in the MTB industry over the last decades? Wheel sizes, hub spacings, etc. These come in briefly, only to be superseded by another. 29er reels arriving to fanfare, then 27.5 happened, and then 29er took over. Do you see it as a glass half full of enthusiastic innovation, or is it a cynical cash grab? I try to be open-minded about it because I used to be very cynical and grumpy engineer about a lot of this stuff, and I was very like that about the 27.5-inch wheel thing, which ironically was I feel was driven by cynical sort of cynical decisions about getting people to buy bikes further up the industry. However, that being the case, I remember going to having not really had 27.5-inch on my radar. 26 and 29 was absolutely fine, and we were doing that. And then turning up at Eurobike in 2013 and just feeling like I've been mugged, because it was like the entire industry had gone 27.5 overnight, and I was like, oh. And then we made 26 Ain't Dead as a bit of a shake fist at the sky kind of thing, which is one of our best viewed videos ever. If you haven't seen it, just Google 26 Ain't Dead and go and watch that. It's amazing. It's the only day I've worn a suit to work at Cotic for the fake funeral of a wheel size. So after that, we developed the 27.5-inch wheel bike, and regardless of my feelings about why the industry made the decision, the 275 Sol and Beefy were better than the 26. Whether we really needed them to come in or not, but they were better. There was a step forward. So from that point onwards, I have always tried to act from a position of knowledge rather than dismissing things out of hand, and that's how long shot geometry happened, which got us way ahead of the game in a lot of ways, because I had a quick go on Chris Porter's Geometron back in 2015 and was like, oh, this is just a bike, isn't it? And actually started working with it and learning. So I do try and try things and be open-minded about it. And actually, a lot of the stuff is actually settled down now. I mean, I know there's a bit of a whisper about 32-inch wheels, but I don't think that's really going to get going. Although I do need to give them a spin at some point. But 29-inch wheels or mixed wheel size, boost hub spacing, taper steerer forks, seat post sizes, bottom brackets, all of that has been pretty settled for a long time. The biggest pain in the arse from a standards and frame integration point of view was transmission, because UDH is relatively easy to integrate, but when transmission moved the chain line outwards, it suddenly made it really hard to do an elegant, lightweight solution in metal. Not just steel. So that's actually been the hardest thing to integrate into the frames recently. But actually, I think things are pretty settled. And from that point of view, certainly mountain bikes, I think we're probably going to see model year. To my point about when the Rocket Max V5 due, is not. I think you're going to have to get used to model life cycles stretching back out again, because there aren't these big shocks and big changes happening. It has kind of settled down, and we're back into sort of detail improvements and evolution again. The first Cotic mountain bike geometry, the original sole geometry, lasted 10 years across 3 generations of frame. But yeah, 10 years. And then we suddenly got into this thing where having to do things every 2 or 3 years just to keep up with all of the changes. But I think it is going to settle down a bit now. Do you ever think about resurrecting the Road Rat or a single speed escapade with a tensioner? Please, slotted dropout or eccentric BB, please. As I said earlier, if you want a single speed escapade, get one of these Velo Orange eccentric BBs. The Escapade had slotty dropouts up to 2018 because it grew out of the Road Rat, which was our flat bar road bike, which was like our third model. It ran from 2005 to 2018. I do miss the Road Rat. I don't know about whether to resurrect it, but I've had reason to look at some of our older photos recently. And there was some, it really struck me, the photos from the model around 2015 with that still had the steel fork, and it was so clean and slim and beautiful. And yeah, I do miss that bike, but I don't know whether people would sell it. We stopped selling it because not enough people were buying them. They were buying the Escapade instead. It's my understanding that you started Cotic when the bike you wanted didn't exist. True story. If you found yourself with today's selection of bikes back then, do you think you would have designed your own, or would you be riding something from another brand? The bike industry is much more diverse than it used to be. So I suspect the imperative would be less strong these days. I probably could find something. I mean, my main bike is a Flare Max at the moment, so a full suspension 29er steel, cool, sort of short travel trail bike. There's 2 or 3 brands doing those, so yeah, maybe I wouldn't. I guess the only thing that the only thing that's completely unique in the market at the moment that we make is the Rocket. So if I wanted an e-bike, I'd have had to do the Rocket, and I'm very glad I have, because I bloody love it. But probably not. When speccing a bike for either for your own or for a friend or for a customer, where do you spend the money and where do you like to save? Does that change by discipline, gravel bike versus mountain bike? On a mountain bike, I always say, well, most bikes really, but mountain bike, spend the money on getting the lightest, best wheels and tyres that are appropriate for what you do. That's not necessarily the lightest on the market per se, but just the lightest wheels that are appropriate for the type of riding you do, because that always makes the bike feel more lively. Big fan of having light wheels, or the lightest wheels for that application. So yeah, wheels and tyres. Then on a mountain bike, Probably suspension, but even then it's a close run thing, because like the deluxe shock that we have as our base model on our drop-link bikes is absolutely brilliant, and even though it's sort of 40% less than the some of the higher end shocks that we sell, it's not 40% less good, it's only about 10% less good. It's like really good. So yeah, suspension's a bit of a funny one. You don't want super cheap suspension forks, but then we don't sell any super cheap suspension forks. So like decent mid-range stuff, especially if you don't like knob twiddling, is probably where to go with the suspension. After that, get decent brakes, but again, brakes are really good up and down the ranges these days. So yeah, wheels is probably the first place to start. Drivetrain on a mountain bike particularly is just get a Dior mechanical 12-speed if you don't want to spend the money, because it's got 90% of the functionality of the higher end stuff, and you can upgrade it as you go along. On gravel bikes, the drivetrain piece is a little bit different, because the Shimano, like the GRX 12-speed, the GRX 800 12-speed, is markedly better functionally than the cheaper stuff, because it has the 12-speed 1051 cassette gives you a much wider range, much smoother shifting, closer gears than the 11-speed stuff. So actually, it's on the gravel bikes, it's probably worth spending the money on the GRX if you can. You speak a lot about the ride of steel. Is there component or spec choices that work particularly well, or any that can ruin it? Thinking parts that affect compliance, like handlebars and wheels. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. Wheels and handlebars can definitely affect it. I mean, I remember riding some early MV wheels back in the day, and they were so stiff that I only did about 2 rides. I couldn't stick them to the floor. They were so stiff that all the places where, I wanted the bike to give and go and have that feel, like that steel feel across chattery sections, the wheels just skittered off it. So too stiff wheels isn't something I enjoy. But I think we're getting past that even in carbon wheels. Not that I'm a massive fan of carbon wheels, but even in carbon wheels, I think they've realised that super stiff isn't necessarily the one. And yeah, handlebars, absolutely, because I think 35mm handlebars are stupid. I have no idea why we've gone that way, why we've ended up there, but every time I ride a bike with 35mm handlebars, it just beats the crap out of my wrists. It's like my suspension needs a service. So yeah, get some 31.8 bars and some nice 31.8 bars, and that'll be way better. The other thing is grips. I use these Ergon GXR foam push-ons, which are absolutely brilliant and just really take the edge off. So yeah, it's worth finding some grips that you like as well. So yeah, stuff like that, definitely. When you're building up a new bike for yourself, what are the first parts you spec? Parts that's going to be reliable and you never need to think about, or parts that help create a ride position that you're looking for? Any favourite saddles, grips, pedals? I haven't actually spec'd a new bike from scratch for a long time, because I have kind of like my own build kit that I move between frames, because I need I try and keep a level of consistency in that, so that I can concentrate on what I'm testing and what I'm developing. Within that, I run XTR mechanical. As I said earlier, I've just been running I've been running that 945 cassette, which is quite fun. I run Magura MT7 brakes, which I really like the feel of. Ergon grips I just mentioned. The favourite saddle. My mate gifted me a couple of years ago a flight titanium saddle from the 90s that he found in his garage, and I put it on my gravel bike, and I was like, oh my god, I love these. So I've been buying second-hand flights off eBay. So I run flight saddles. I run one-up aluminium pedals, not the new ones, but the older ones, the real thin ones. Really like those. I try and run, and then after that I just run wheels that are appropriate to the bike, so that tends to be a little bit more moving. And I've had some E-Wings cranks for years, they'll probably outlast me. I do I know they're stupidly expensive, but they are really cool, and I absolutely love them. So, and yeah, handlebars. I mostly use Cotic handlebars because we've got the high-rise ones now, which give me a nice kind of position. So yeah, that kind of stuff. That's another one about the industry. So yeah. So I remember you talked about riding Chris Porter's Geometron around the car park as a revelatory experience. Yeah, I just told you about that. How important it is to be riding, testing bikes from other brands. Have you ever had any profound experiences through other brands? I don't actually ride other brands' stuff all that much at all. But what I do is, to my point earlier about the trends, is that if I see somebody doing something new or different or interesting, I try and aim to prototype it ourselves, to try it out, and just so that I can understand it for myself. I have ridden a few e-bikes during the e-bike development, so that's probably where I spent the most time, on other brands' bikes. But yeah, I mean, it was just a good way of getting a frame of reference about what an SL e-bike feels like, what a Bosch power system feels like. But I didn't sort of come away sort of blown away by the bikes or anything like that. They were just perfectly nice bikes. Right. So, this is quite a long one. Could you elaborate on the differences between Reynolds and Cotic FE? I've already done that. Let's see. Any plans to do a dedicated road bike? No. This is a bit stay in our lane. With the exception of Paul, and even now he doesn't ride it all that much, none of us ride road bikes, so I wouldn't know where to start in making a better road bike. I actually think the Escapade makes a very lovely road bike. The roads are terrible, and I think the idea of something with slightly mellower handling and comfy tyres it makes for a really nice road bike. But no plans for a full-on road bike. What's your favourite longest section of downhill here in the peaks? It's one of the hand-built trails up on Win Hill called Gift That Keeps On Giving, because it is, as long as being one of the longest, it's also one of my favourites. It's got this amazing long section of single track, and then it kind of gets a little bit more techy and edgy, and then just sort of plunges quite steeply at the end. It's absolutely brilliant. Love it. Have a titanium hardtail. Would you consider making a titanium gravel frame? Already mentioned that. Titanium's not for us while the environmental impact is too high. So no, we won't be building titanium gravel frames. If you could only ride and produce one bike model, what would it be? I mean, if I actually wanted some kind of a functional brand or company, then it would have to be the Cascade, because I do enjoy the Cascade, and it is currently our biggest selling model. But I am a mountain biker, so I think it would have to be one of the mountain bikes. I really like my e-bike. Could I have only an e-bike? I wouldn't ideally like to have only an e-bike, but then I wouldn't ideally only like to have a Cascade. So. Yeah, don't know, tricky one. I'm in the very fortunate position of being able to have 3 bikes that do different things. Where are we going? So let's see. Can you add more group set options to the gravel bikes, including wireless? We do have a wireless option. You can have wireless. You can have GRX Di2. I think it's coming into stock this month actually. So I think the only reason why it's not been obvious on the price list so far is just because we couldn't get it. But yeah, we can do Di2, and now on the new Cascades because they're UDH, we can put full mount, SRAM full mount on there. Get in touch. It's your bike built for you. We can get anything you like. We met a couple of years ago at the Leger World Cup and spoke a little about gearboxes. I wondered if with the development of electronic shifting on the pinion MGU, would Cotic pinion gearbox ever join the lineup? There's no plans at the moment. It's just not. It's really quite hard to engineer a decent gearbox bike, and there's not a big enough demand for it. So no, there's no real plans for it. It's not something we get asked for a lot. And if we did do something with a gearbox, it would almost certainly be on the e-bike first. But even there, we've got no plans for it. I'm wondering where the overlap is with the Solaris and the Beefy current versions. Is the Beefy still up for an all-day trad-style mountain bike ride with some bike packing, as well as the more hardcore stuff? Is the Solaris appreciably springier, nimbler in feel? The Solaris is appreciably springier and nimbler in feel. It very much is. It's quite a different feeling bike to the Beefy, but the Beefy is a much more mellow riding bike than people perhaps think it might be, because from its name and the way we market it, because it is the tougher bike. So no, the Beefy would absolutely be nice for a trail bike ride. And if you want to do bike packing on it, read the bikepacking.com review of it earlier in the summer. Just search bikepacking.com Cotic Beefy. They absolutely loved it. So yeah, the Beefy's probably got the broader bandwidth because it can do a bit more hardcore sort of technical stuff because of the nature of the bike. And if you're if you're happy with the extra kilo or so of weight with the heavier forks and frame and what have you, then you can obviously do long rides on it as well. But the Solaris, for what it's designed to do, is really beautiful bike. I'm just going to check this is still going because we've been going on a while. Yeah, we're still good. Okay, so Flare Max isn't that much lighter than a Rocket Max, so despite the difference in travel. How much is this due to economies of scale, e.g. shared tubing, or is there scope to make a lighter Flare Max? The Flare Max isn't that much lighter than the Rocket Max, mainly because the difference in tubing, because of the stiffness that we want to achieve between the two bikes. It's not just about the strength, and it's not. I mean, they do share a rear end, but there's no real economies of. There's no real. That's not sort of willfully heavy just for the Rocket Max. The bottom out loads for the two bikes in terms of the safety testing are the same, so it has to be that strong. There's about half a kilo in it. The Rocket Max has a considerably heavier down tube, top tube, and head tube than the Flare Max. But the main thing is but actually the difference in the frames isn't really the thing that you need to worry about, because it would be very hard to build a Rocket Max that would ride nicely as light as a Flare Max, because you need to build the Rocket Max with like 170mm 38 stanchion forks, which are they're the best part of they're rolling on 3/4 of a kilo heavier than some SID 120s that you could put on a Flare Max really lightly, and you put some pretty tough wheels and tires on a Rocket Max, and you put some pretty light wheels on a Flare Max. So actually the key difference it's not really about the frames, it's about the things that are appropriate to build the bike with, because you can build like a 12.5 to 13 kilo Flare Max and it will be wonderful, and but you're going to be up at sort of 15 kilos for a Rocket Max. So yeah, that's the main difference. I'm just going to have a drink. I'm getting a bit croaky, sorry. Okay. 105 GTI, 205, 1.9 GTI or 306 GTI 6. 306 GTI 6, as I mentioned earlier, I did have one up until recently. I loved it, and I was never much of a 205 guy. They were a little bit before my time. So yeah, 306 GTI 6. Would it be possible to manufacture a bolt-on bottom bracket system for the Rocket, making it infinitely adaptable? I mean, theoretically, yes. Some guys just done that for a Specialized, I think. And yeah, you could take off the battery mounting pretty easily as well and turn it into a conventional bike. Yeah, I suppose it would be. It's not something that's on our radar at the moment. Just like, I guess, would make the Rocket one bike to rule them all if you had the e-bike version, but if you do want just a really nice long travel bike to pedal around on without a motor, just buy a Rocket Max. Have you considered B Corp certification? We did look into it briefly, but it's actually a bit of a sham. Some of the brands that are and companies that have achieved B Corp status are still pretty evil. There was a really great feature about it in Bother magazine, which our friends at Heb Troco do, about it, and they were saying about what a scam it was basically, and that actually they wanted to be a D Corp, as in don't be a dick. So yeah, we're a D Corp. Will you continue to use Shimano battery and motor tech on the e-bike when Shimano update/replace their current offerings? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't see any reason to change. We really like the Shimano stuff, and I'm sure they're probably working on some new things as well, just like everybody. But nothing we've seen suggests that they're going to be changing the bolt pattern or anything like that. So yeah, we'll keep using Shimano. Yeah. Why no flat bar options on the order form for Escapade or Cascade? Up until recently, it wasn't that big a demand for it, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, we've built plenty. Like I say, it's your bike built for you. They're assembled right over there. We can get pretty much anything you like. So the order forms are just a starting point. Just get in touch with us and start the conversation. But yeah, maybe we need to. We've been asked a little bit, but yeah, that's that. So yeah, I think that's everything. So that was my Ask Me Anything. I'd be interested to know what you thought, any more questions. Drop a comment or drop me an email. Would you like me to do these more often? Yeah, let me know. That was fun. Thank you, lovely people. I've been Si from Cotic, and this was my Ask Me Anything. Take care. We'll see you soon.